So hi everybody, welcome. On this, the beginning of Memorial Day weekend, which maybe you knew it, but it only really occurred to me the other day that this is the beginning of Memorial Day weekend, and then I thought this is a good idea, so thank you so much for starting your holiday weekend here. Because why not? Who wants to be in all the traffic right now anyway, right?
Yeah.
So, welcome to our panel on kinkeeping, the media and methods of family time binding. I'm Peggy Cassidy. I'm the president of the New York Society for General Semantics. Thank you. My usual spiel, right? Who else is here who's on the board? Our secretary, Lance Straight. Our vice president, Terry Manzella. Tom Gencarelli is off climbing mountains somewhere, our treasurer, so he's not here. One of our other board members, Terry McLuhan. Am I forgetting anybody? No, I think that's it. Okay. Are you ready for it? She's on the IGS board. I'll get there in a second. And I feel like I'm blocking you, but so my usual thing. NYSGS events are always free, as you know, because you're here. We always like to encourage you, though, to join the Institute of General Semantics, which for the modest fee of $50 for a regular person and $25 for a student, you get a membership in IGS. You get to come to the Alfred Korzybski Memorial Lecture and Symposium and fancy dinner in the fall, which the dates downstairs. The dates are, Lance?
October 2nd to 4th.
October 2nd to 4th. You should be watching for a call for submissions, which I believe has happened, right? It's out, and so if you're inspired to want to present something, by all means, submit something. You also get discounts in our bookstore. You get courses, online things. You could, for an additional fee. And London, that's what I was about to say. We're going to London, people, in July. Join us. It's not free, though, but join us. It'll be great. It's discounted. And you get the journal, the IGS journal, etc. A review of General Semantics, a quarterly journal. So, yay. Tonight, the way we're going to do this is I will introduce the three of us, panelists, and it'll be the same as usual in the sense that each of us will talk a little and then we'll talk together and then we'll open it up to everybody. We're going to do a little bit longer than usual. Like sometimes we do fairly casual or fairly brief opening remarks. This may be a little bit more like a conference panel where we're going to talk, 10 minutes or so each, just so you can kind of set your expectations accordingly. And so what I'll do is fold. Normally I would do like a little intro to what is this all about, and then we would kick it off, but in my opening 10 minutes or so, I'll put it in there. So I will introduce our panelists, and then we didn't talk about this in advance, but I'll go first.
I'll go last.
Okay, I mean, we've done this little thing before. You'll hear in a second at other conferences, and usually it's sort of like a me, Sue, Mary, me, Mary, Sue. But here are our panelists. Susan Drucker JD is a distinguished professor of journalism in the Department of Journalism and Media Studies in the School of Communication at Hofstra University. She is an attorney and a treasurer of the Urban Communication Foundation. She is the author and editor or co-editor of 13 books and over 200 articles and book chapters, including the Urban Communication Reader, Voices in the Street, Gender, Media, and Public Space, and Urban Communication Regulations, Communication Freedoms and Limits. Her work examines the relationship between media technology and human factors, particularly as viewed from a legal perspective. Mary Call, PhD, is Professor Emeritus and former Senior Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at the Pennsylvania State University, the Behrend College. She previously held faculty and academic administrative appointments at the University of California at Davis, Boston College, the State University of New York at New Paltz, and Indiana State University. Her scholarly interests include political campaign debates, gender studies, and presidential discourses. She has authored or co-authored over 20 scholarly essays, appearing in such venues as the Quarterly Journal of Speech, the Journal of Critical and Cultural Studies, the Journal of Health Communication, Communication Quarterly, and the Western Journal of Communication. Her best-selling co-authored textbook, Advanced Public Speaking, A Leader's Guide with Michael J. Hostetler, is in its third printing with Routledge. Mary has collaborated with and appeared on C-SPAN, the BBC, and NPR, among other news outlets. Her most recent academic projects interrogate, why presidents lie, the gender dimension. We'll have you back for that one.
How long you got?
The gender dimensions of kinkeeping, and presidential foreign policy speeches delivered in former Soviet bloc countries. I'm Peggy Cassidy. This feels silly for me to read my own bio. Yay. So I'm a professor of communication at Adelphi University. What else? What do I want to say about myself? I am president of the New York Society for General Semantics. I'm on the board of IGS, the Institute of General Semantics, with others in the room, with Lance, with Sue. Am I missing?
And you dance in the free time.
I dance in my free time, that's true. I'm editor of the Media Ecology Association's journal, Explorations in Media Ecology. I'm a former president of the MEA and of the New York State Communication Association. And right now, this topic has
An author of?
I'm author of things, of Bookends, The Changing Media Environment of American Classrooms, and Children, Media, and American History, Pernicious Poison, no. What's the subtitle?
So she's fun.
Okay, wait a minute. I know this.
You're closest in it.
Children, Media, and American History, Printed Poison, Pernicious Stuff, and Other Terrible Temptations. Okay, so I'll go first. I think I might sit. If you can't hear me, you're going to say, I can't hear, so I'll hear you saying that and I'll stand up.
What?
It feels weird to be sitting, so I'm going to stand. Okay, so here we go. Kinkeeping. In the past year or two, I have become increasingly interested in the concept of kinkeeping and the media we use for this purpose. In short, kinkeeper is a term used primarily by sociologists to describe the person in a family who holds that family together across space and time. They are the glue of families. You all know the type. Maybe some of you are the type. This is the point where people start to nod in recognition. The one who maintains a calendar with everyone's birthday on it and reminds you to send a greeting card. The person in your family who coordinates holiday celebrations and makes sure photos of family events get taken and shared. I presented my first thoughts about kinkeeping at the IGS Symposium in October 2024. It was a very brief talk, just very preliminary musings, so I was really very surprised by the number of people who sought me out afterwards to talk some more. In particular, Mary and Sue were intrigued enough that we put together a panel for the Media Ecology Association convention last summer in Mexico City. Since then, we've spoken on the topic at least 2 other conferences, right? And we are planning to co-edit a book. Stay tuned for the call for submissions if you want to be part of this project. As I started to read more about kinkeeping, I immediately saw the connection to the general semantics concept of time binding. For Alfred Korzybski, time binding, as so many of you know, is the very essence of what makes us human. It is the uniquely human capacity to pass down the accumulated knowledge of what he called, quote, the all-precious lives of past generations, end quote, to future generations. Humans use time binding to connect past, present, and future, and to enable present and future people to benefit from all that humans have learned up to this point. And although Korzybski was talking about much more than what individual families might do to preserve and build upon their own members' past experiences, how can we not see our own families in his reference to the all-precious lives of past generations and want to enact this time-binding process with them in mind? And that's where there is a clear connection with the concept of kinkeeping. Kinkeeping cultivates a family sense of shared identity. Families with a kinkeeper are more likely to spend time together across generations in gatherings that include extended family members, not just members of the immediate nuclear family. They place higher value on sentimental family objects. And stay tuned, I think there are some sentimental family objects here that we're going to hear about in a couple minutes. Kinkeeping also plays a role in people's health and well-being. Kinkeepers are often the ones who remind family members about preventative care and to encourage relatives to seek medical treatment. They coordinate care when a family member is injured, sick, or elderly. The importance of family continuity is thrust into people's awareness when that continuity is threatened. Typically, this is upon the death of an elderly parent, especially the death of a mother, or the point at which middle-aged family members become particularly aware of the fragility of their parents. This is often the point where the role of family kinkeeper has to be passed from one generation to the next. For example, when an elderly kinkeeper can't do all of their usual holiday preparations and has to enlist others to help out or take over. It's when we become more acutely aware of the passing of time and what our family stands to lose, not just a person we love, but all of the knowledge and experience that are bound up in that person and possibly only in that person. It's when we realize that nobody is exactly sure of the details of a favorite family recipe, or who an antique military medal belonged to, or what was the story behind a piece of jewelry that has been in the family for generations. There are people in old family photos who no one can identify, and family stories with inconsistencies or gaps that need clarification from someone who was there, or who remembers being told these stories by their parents or grandparents. And this isn't just about photos, household objects, recipes, and holiday traditions. Kinkeeping is also about internalizing the inspiring qualities of courage, creativity, or integrity that we have learned about in stories that have come down to us from our ancestors. To return to Korzybski's words, we want to follow the example of our ancestors and preserve, in his words, the accumulated achievements of the all-precious lives of the past generations, so that our present and future generations can benefit from those who came before them. So that's in brief what kinkeeping is. Now, how is it done? Through what media, what symbolic forms? And what do changes in the media environment mean for the process of kinkeeping? Kinkeeping certainly takes place through traditional media like oral history, photographs, letters, and all manner of mementos. And now we use digital media to digitize and preserve those analog media, as well as to keep family members connected across geographical distance and to coordinate family plans and support. And this is where I want to bring you back, or for the first time ever, to Gary Gumpert's 1987 book, Talking Tombstones and Other Tales of the Media Age, which I believe is in a new, it's working on it, new, rewrite, new edition. Stay tuned. In the introduction to Talking Tombstones, Gumpert talks about what it's like to walk through a cemetery, the way we look at the stones and try to imagine who a gravestone commemorates, and how very incomplete an epitaph on a tombstone really is. He talks about a 1977 issue of People magazine that included a description of an invention designed to help the deceased and their survivors communicate with one another. The article describes, quote, a solar-powered headstone containing a recording device and a video display screen on which can be beamed a biographical account, a genealogy, and a computerized photograph. So this is 1987. You can get to guess now already. The price tag for this multimedia headstone? What do you think?
50,000.
Okay, $39,500 for a vandal-proof headstone covered by bulletproof glass.
Oh my God, bulletproof glass.
And Gumpert thinks it over. He writes, quote, now there is a way to talk back with an interactive audiovisual computerized legacy. How many of us can escape from looking at the collection of photographs which constitute the family album? Someone is caught in a moment of time, and suddenly we have a fragment of understanding about the person, with the shadowy past locked in the photograph. How much more vivid the legacy becomes as other sense modalities, more media, are used to preserve the past and to animate it in the present. That's the end of Gary's quote. He goes on to muse some more about the possibilities, how a person could pre-record responses to the kinds of questions people might want to ask you or your tombstone in the future, or advice you might want to give in different kinds of situations. He says, quote, assume for the moment that the talking tombstone became economically feasible and was available to anyone who wished to leave a multimedia sepulcher as a last earthly statement. Who would refuse to leave to the future the insights and words of wisdom gathered over a lifetime? What family would not plead with its elderly to prepare a message before the day of departure? Is the idea far-fetched? End of Gary's quote. So let's stop for a second, and I'll stop in a second too, so these other people can speak. Is it far-fetched? No, right? The technology for that solar-powered multimedia gravestone that cost almost $40,000 in, 1977?
Yeah.
Oh, 77, is accessible at minimal cost to all of us today. Now, what about our feelings about using a variety of media to memorialize our loved ones? Well, we do all kinds of things with media now. We announce deaths and reach out for consolation on social media. Funeral homes routinely post information about services on their websites, funeral services, not just the services they offer, and offer the opportunity for mourners to post online remembrances. We compile slideshows of photographs, we save video and audio recordings. Gumpert argued in 1987 that it is really not all that difficult to imagine these talking tombstones catching on. Similarly, as virtual reality and AI technologies become more sophisticated and less expensive, we will probably want to be able to experience our loved ones through those technologies, which might feel a little weird now, but which might not feel so weird someday. Which brings us to the whole new world of grief tech. I don't know if you're following this yet, but it's so interesting. A variety of services that enable people to remember, commemorate, and honor the deceased, and even to virtually interact with representations of them. For example, there are a number of companies now that create gravestone medallions, these durable medallions with a QR code that visitors can scan to gain access to additional information about the deceased. RememberMyStory.com is an example. They'll create a medallion that is guaranteed to work for 100 years. That is, the medallion is durable enough to last 100 years, and the online profile is guaranteed to exist for 100 years. I don't know how. I don't know how that, anyway, but okay. The profile contains digitized photos, text, video, and or audio content. The cost for this service?
$150K.
$100.
Way off.
And just so to finish out this thought, then there's MemoryGram, which is only slightly more expensive. For $127.50, you get something very similar, a medallion and an online profile, but there is also, and this is kind of the last thought I want to throw out at you for now, a voice option, which their website describes as follows. This is their website. When you are creating the virtual memorial, there is a section to upload a short voice clip of your loved one and answer some personality tuning questions. Once you add this to the virtual memorial, a Talk With button will appear, and you can have a conversation with your loved one's voice and personality. It includes a demonstration of this voice feature where a grieving child says, "I miss you, Grandma," and Grandma says, "I miss you too, dear." Yeah, I was all up to this point, but this is where I start to not know. I appreciate the appeal, but don't we risk creating an AI version of the person we love that isn't necessarily true to who they were or what they were like, but is more what we wanted them to be or what we want them to be for us now? And I'll go on later when we sort of start to talk together, but to come back to general semantics, that's where I start to think about what is time binding really, and is that really time binding? You know, is that bringing that person into the future with us, or is that crafting a version, or is that what we're always doing anyway in some way? So I hope that gives you some sense of what kinkeeping is about, and I will sit down and let Sue and Mary decide who's next. Sue?
Okay, well, I'll take over from there.
Okay.
Because the media of kinkeeping was a fascinating. Want me to stand up? Okay. Okay. So the media of kinkeeping was a fascinating academic topic when Peggy first introduced it here at the Players at the AKML event in October of 2024. And as she mentioned, it really ignited an interest in me and in Mary. We hadn't really thought very much about this in this way before. But in the months that followed, it's become a very personal matter to me. It has me pondering my values, media, and frankly, my ethical and legal obligations. As some of you know from my constant moaning over the last year and a half, I have faced going through seemingly countless photographs and documents and artifacts collected by my mother, my father, and my partner. And each one of them, thankfully, had over 90 years to amass and preserve an enormous amount of stuff. There's a lot of stuff. Some of the items I understood why they were held onto, I understood why they were cherished. But in some cases, I have to admit that I was quite surprised by what I uncovered. Things ranging from teething rings and 70-year-old textbooks to keepsakes and kinescopes, including those which some of you have seen. Yearbooks, autograph books, slides, recipe cards from people who didn't cook. My home is full, my garage is full, and an inordinate amount of my paycheck goes to a paid storage facility. And do I sound stressed? A little overwhelmed? Okay. So some of you heard some of this before at the media ecology meeting last year. But I have to say that I can report that in the intervening time since last June, there is, I think, some clarity that is beginning to form around my thoughts about what my responsibility is and what I should be preserving and what might reach the curb. So there are fewer sleepless nights, I'm happy to report. But sometimes feeling overwhelmed, what I try to do is to deal with things that I think I know a little bit about, to try to help me navigate the world. And I think I know a little bit about the law, I hope, and I think I know a little bit about general semantics, although I always have more to learn. And so what I've tried to do is to kind of look back to those linchpins, to try to analyze and make some sense out of this sense of, this feeling of being overwhelmed. And so of course, as Peggy pointed out, I turn back to the concept of time binding in action, preserving and transmitting family knowledge, as well as, this is part of what's becoming clearer to me, learning about how to preserve family knowledge, but also how to preserve what may be important to the outside world, beyond family. Certainly some of the documents that have been entrusted to me, I think have greater historical significance than to just the family. So that adds kind of an extra layer of responsibility. My mother was the Kinkeeper in our fairly large extended family. And my partner was the Kinkeeper of his smaller family. Some people inherit money.
We should be so
For
lucky.
better or for worse, I think I've inherited the role of Kinkeeper. Thanks, Mom and Gary. So I return to this question of duty, which takes me back to time binding. The duty in question, I think, was implanted in me early on, growing up in a multi-generational home with, shall I say, a strong-willed and opinionated grandmother. And she emphasized the Jewish concept of generation to generation, or levador vidor, literally meaning generation to generation. It's written into the liturgy, it's written into our prayers, emphasizing a sacred duty to pass on history, values, traditions from ancestors to descendants. It's supposed to be an unbroken chain, ensuring continuity, connecting individuals to their ancestors and to the future through doing good deeds, through family rituals, like a Passover Seder, through sharing family history, whether you want to hear it or not. So here I am. I have two nieces who I adore, an extended family, and obligations that they may not even recognize that I feel I have. I mean, some may think that because I've never given birth to children, but I've given birth to books, that may remove me from some of that family obligation. But that's not my reality. My reality is that I have that obligation. I don't think you can get through an evening of general semantics without uttering, "The map is not the territory." So I'll be the one to do it.
Thank you.
So, we'll see what happens. And so the labels are just representations, not the actual thing. And so the labels, I'm personalizing it, but the label of aunt, of sister, of cousin, of partner, fails to represent my reality. In a sense, kinkeepers manage and perhaps draw the maps of a family. Their actions may shape who knows what, who's labeled the difficult one, who's labeled the black sheep, or even what the family is, and shaping the family narrative, interpreting how events fit into family meaning. So that's kind of an extra layer of kinkeeping. So there's a lot to deal with. How can I play the role of kinkeeper? How can I make my home welcoming as a home base for the family? I think kinkeepers have that question. To me, how do I invite my family over for holidays without feeling that I'm being too demanding on them? How far does my kin go? In North America, typically we emphasize the nuclear family. But increasingly, that nuclear family that remains connected involves adult children who have children of their own. And then the basic unit becomes what's being called the modified extended family. And it's the children, adult children, grandchildren that become the core. But then as a kinkeeper, the question becomes, what about that third cousin once removed that we were actually close to, that we saw once a month, that we went to birthday parties and anniversaries and every wedding and bar mitzvah that we grew up with? How far does kin go as the generations grow? And how do I handle the artifacts of family? And that last one is the one that really has been weighing on me. It's been confounding. Family artifacts are the physical hallmarks of history and relationships, and they help draw the map. Family heirlooms include furniture, jewelry, military medals. We have handwritten letters, diaries, recordings that preserve voices of our ancestors, of course photographs. And it actually takes me, go back to some of the principles of general semantics, it takes me back to some of Howard's ladder of abstraction. Because it seems to me that those artifacts are concrete, right? So they are the lower, the lower level of the ladder. And these concrete artifacts, this is part of what I've been weighing, the concrete artifacts raise one set of issues. But another set of issues comes back to the abstractions that are higher on the ladder. Abstractions that may, in some way, obscure the broader reason of why people are kinkeepers. So it may look as if I'm really greedy, that I want to hold on to the family pictures, or that they should all be in one place. But maybe the broader issue is, what role do they play? What role do these artifacts play in the larger aim of preserving a sense of continuity in a family, and that duty that I feel that I have? The questions that then get raised about these artifacts: how do I distribute, or do I distribute, old photographs, or are things like this important? So I walk through the house, and these things emerge sometimes. I don't know where they've been, but the other day, I was walking by a bookcase. I said, gee, I don't remember that. And I pulled this out, and this is a writing portfolio that has notes from a biology class that apparently my aunt took in 1942. I didn't know we had this. What's my obligation? Do her children care about this? She's got 2 children. Do I give this to them? Will they preserve it? Or should I keep it in one location because I know it will be safe? And then what kind of headache am I giving my nieces? What's their responsibility? It's going to be on you. What's my responsibility and my duty to them? Do I make it easier for them by tossing this, or do I preserve it and give them that headache? And then there's this. So the other artifacts that I've gotten, I think, have some greater historical significance beyond the family. And so Gary Gumbert left me artifacts that he believed were important. And so I have everything from his citizenship papers, the originals, to his birth certificate with the Nazi stamp on it, which I know there is an archive in Dusseldorf that would like the originals. And so that gets to this question of, that I'm also grappling with, of, does the original matter? Authenticity. Would they be willing to take, an archive willing to take a copy? They've said they would. But I'm holding the original, and do I have an obligation to share that original? And if so, with whom? Or these. So here's a Christmas card to Gary from this guy that's named Marshall McLuhan. Or I've got letters from the same guy. And so here we have a letter from Marshall McLuhan. Harry, you might be interested in this. But a letter from him saying that he's giving him flight information from when he's going to come to Queens College to speak. He's flying in on April 28th, you'd be happy to know. Or a letter from September 21st, 1963, saying, dear Gary, it would be grand to see you and Lee Dreyfus again. And in fact, that could very well happen, because I've just begun to direct a new center here, a graduate center, for the study of extensions of men. And, goes on. And I think maybe somebody would be interested in the original. So there is a sense of responsibility that I feel having these artifacts. What do you do with photographs? And I'll finish. I don't want to take up too much time, but what do you do with the original photographs in an age of digitalization? Does it matter? Do the originals matter anymore? Or would a digital copy do? I've got motion pictures. Should I, on a reel, I've got the projector. The projector has a bulb. The bulb isn't made any longer. So we have this little window of opportunity where without digitalization, we can watch the movie maybe once, but if the projector goes, then we can't watch. So do I have an obligation to digitize? There are all sorts of issues, I think, that also haunt me about the originals. Does anybody still care about an original? Is this a generational shift? Maybe I care about the originals. And I go back to the grounding in law. Maybe I care, there's a best evidence rule. The originals count in law. Maybe they'll count to millennials and Gen Z and Gen X or whatever gen we're on.
Or me and Aunt Martha.
Maybe we don't notice. And certainly much of my thinking is rooted in this question of authenticity. I go back to obviously the work of Walter Benjamin. I think the bottom line for me is, again, I feel, and maybe it's a generational issue, but I feel a sense of connection with an original. When I hold a document in my hand, or an original telegram congratulating someone on getting married or becoming a parent for the first time, or holding a passport with a Nazi swastika on it, which I've got in my basement. I feel connected, and I feel that that's important. Copying, digitizing, and improving on the copy, taking out scratches or imperfections, that may be more valuable to some people. But to me, the original still counts. On Mother's Day, going to the bookshelf and taking my mother's yearbook off the shelf and opening it to her page and reading, "When Bella speaks, we all take heed. Pearls of wisdom are hers indeed." And knowing that never changed. That original means something to me. I hope it means something to the rest of the family. I think the medium of memory matters, and I think the media of memory continues to matter. So, just a few opinions.
I guess the norm is that one stands. Terry, was it something I said?
Just handing up
Okay.
a cracker.
One of the things that I wanted to begin with this evening was something that we, the three of us, have talked about on various panels previously, but has so far only been lost in tonight's remarks. And that is that kinkeeping is essentially a gendered communicative function. It's paramount, of course, as we know, for maintaining family, friendship, and workplace continuities, but it's done primarily by and for women. The avenues of connection that have been traced by various sociological theories of kinship are three in number. First of all, we have kin that is affiliation by blood. Those are people who account for our shared DNA, the sense of family in the true sense of the word. But there is also an affiliation known as an affiliation by law. and that accounts for our in-laws or the people in our families who are adopted or other legal connections that have been formalized. And finally, there's affiliation by choice, which is something that I particularly like, and it accounts for our chosen friends, our work communities, and other kindred spirits that come into our lives along our paths. However you look at kinkeeping, whether it's one of these three or a combination of these three, the term kinkeeping continually refers to activities that are undertaken by individuals to grow, promote, and retain relationships, both within and sometimes across these avenues of connection. And I think kinkeeping, the literature looks at continuities within the connections, but I hope that our work will also look at continuities between connections. So that, for example, many of us in this room count each other as friends and maybe as family members because of our shared interest in academics. So the people with whom we work then become like members of our family or like sisters or brothers to us. But kinkeeping is often done by women, and it's women mostly who preserve the communicative practices, the traditions, the relationships within the clan, however that clan is comprised. It's focused on building connections, and it's often unseen and unrecognized work. It's done frequently without formal designation. There's no pin that says Kinkeeper, though there could be. It's labor that is increasingly interpersonal in orientation, even as we grow less interpersonally oriented in our modes of communication. And it's heavy lifting. It's heavy lifting. Kinkeepers serve as linchpins of facilitation and information. They organize events. They respond to crises. They keep open channels of communication, all as Peggy had suggested to us in her opening remarks. According to Junith Keefe, who is the author of Kinkept, Intentionally Nurturing Connections, kinkeepers was a term originally used to describe the older, often unmarried women in a family who spent time and effort helping to keep the generations connected. This original definition encompassed activities such as keeping photograph albums, scrapbooks, old correspondence, and recipes. It is often invoked at the time of family reunions. The scaffolding support of a family often falls to kinkeepers. But not all kinkeeping happens within families. As Keefe argues, in modern times we choose our families. In many cases we choose our kin. And we also choose those activities that help us kinkeep those people to whom we're not genetically related. And I would argue that kinkeeping and the consumption of food is a logical connection. In fact, the consumption of food and cooking is in many ways the hallmark of kinkeeping. So tonight I want to talk a bit about kinkeeping and cookbooks, which may sound just too out there. But the more I get into it, and I love to cook, by the way, but the more I get into it, the more I find a deeply flavored stew of things that we can unpack. Cooking and the consumption of food is a noteworthy hallmark of kinkeeping, and it carries with it a notable association of the concept of time binding, which I need not rehearse, but I'm asserting. Please come, sit, join us. No, really.
You want to interrupt? Go ahead. It's fine.
Ultimately, the primary goal of time binding, of course, is to build on human progress, notably adding to the accomplishments and knowledge of prior generations, as we know. Well, the compilation of recipes across generations, the keeping of cookbooks, of recipe cards, of binders full of recipes. Sorry, Mitt Romney, that was rude. Even the organization and storage of recipes in various cloud-based services these days represents one of the primary events and the primary functions of kinkeeping. So I brought visual aids. This is the oldest cookbook that I own. It's the Boston Cooking School cookbook by Fannie Merritt Farmer.
Oh,
It's not the only old cookbook I own, but it's the oldest one that I own. The original publication date is 1886, and this edition that Terry is holding was printed in 1923, which was 4 years after my mom was born.
wow.
The book opens with a quotation from Victorian writer John Ruskin, and I quote, "Cookery means the knowledge of Medea and of Circe and of Helen and of the Queen of Sheba. It means the knowledge of all herbs and fruits and balms and spices and all that is healing and sweet in the fields and groves and savory in meats. It means carefulness and inventiveness and willingness and readiness of appliances. It means the economy of your grandmothers and the science of the modern chemist. It means much testing and no wasting. It means English thoroughness and French art and Arabian hospitality. And in sum, it means that you are to be perfectly and always, ladies, loaf givers." Loaf givers means giving of bread, of course. Note to the life source, and women are typically the ones who are tasked with the making of the bread. Note also that in what I just read to you, there's an emphasis on the scientific idea of cookery, on the study of foods and their dietetic value. So this, even in this early edition, it leads to an emphasis on cooking as leading to better mental and physical work. And with that, in time, disease would be less prevalent. Actually, that's not so far from where we are today. Think about the push to eat more protein. Think about the emphasis on consuming whole grains. Think about cutting down on saturated fats as a means to wellness. And I think it's also important to note there are no pictures in that cookbook. It's not illustrated with pictures. Visual aid number 2. This is my mother's
Betty Crocker.
cookbook.
And there's another.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
That's not a recipe.
I should have she shoved everything, in this cookbook. There are pressed flowers, there are recipes, there's everything in here. There's notation, and of course there are some splatters and splashes of things as well. But notice that this cookbook is illustrated. And there's always a key recipe for any recipe that is a major thing, like, say, a roast chicken. And then there are variations that you can make on that roast chicken, so you can add your own special culinary touch to the cookbook.
What's the date of that cookbook?
But wait, it's 1950.
Right, you became visual.
And she owned it before I was born,
Yeah.
because I was born in 54. So, yeah.
So what is you brought us pictures?
And so we have pictures. They're all done in black and white, but there are pictures to show the promise of cooking. Almost all cookbooks promise a happy outcome. I hate to tell you, Sue, but there are no duds in cookbooks. This is my Betty Crocker cookbook that was given to me when I went away to college in 1972. Yeah, I know I'm an old fart. But there are pictures, and some of them are in color.
Ooh.
Hungry, anybody? I know, I gotta watch my
That's
time.
very
But again, there are key recipes and there are things that you can do to make your recipe specialized. But again, it's a function of women typically, not always, but typically in everyday life to do the cooking. So apart from the communicative functions of cooking itself, there's something really nostalgic about looking at old cookbooks, flipping through the pages. Older cookbooks can be worth thousands of dollars. The one I passed around is. But the cookbooks, cookbooks are also windows into another time. One of my grandmother's handwritten recipes that I inherited talked about cooking in a hot oven. Meaning a wood stove oven that was hot before any kind of thermostatic control technology existed. Or, do you know the origin of an icebox cake?
Yes.
Yes.
An icebox was a refrigerator before, there was an icebox that held ice. And so the way you made the cake was to put the ingredients in the icebox to get in there icebox cake or icebox cookies. Notably, there are also windows into other cultural efforts at kinkeeping. So these are really snapshots of everyday life and regional culture. Where I grew up in northern Michigan, a lot of ladies' auxiliaries would make cookbooks as a fundraising endeavor. And so one hallmark of the Sue knows this, one hallmark of the cookbooks that I grew up with is there are 9 ways to make venison. Because in the culture I grew up in, that was called backyard beef. And everybody had venison. Or they know how to make things with frozen vegetables or even, God forbid, canned vegetables, because at certain times of the year it was difficult to come by fresh veggies that were any good at all. My mother in this cookbook has a recipe for how to make sweetener like as sugar out of honey, because during the war effort during World War II, you could barter for honey in a local community, but if you were out of sugar ration stamps, you couldn't bake unless you found a substitute. So cookbooks can tell us to conclude not just what people ate, but how they secured their food, the foods that were plentiful, how people preserved it, how they valued it, and how food fit into the contours of society. What about ethnic neighborhoods and the ethnic restaurants? And at some point, food itself becomes a medium because it's something that we all consume and value. So we know that kinkeeping is essentially a function of time binding. But I'm increasingly coming to the idea that, at least as far as kinkeeping and cookbooks are concerned, there's a real element of space binding here as well. And I haven't really delved into that yet, and I'm hoping that perhaps you can help me think more deeply about that in our comments. But thank you. Where's my cookbook?
It's floating around.
Okay.
No one leaves until the cookbook is
Okay.
back.
It's listed on eBay.
Yes, sir. I had a couple things that I wanted to say, but now I want to say something else entirely because I didn't know this is what you were going to talk about. And
I kept that as a surprise.
no, that's fabulous. I have to show you at some point. And I don't know if Missy has ever seen this. My husband's family has. You just reminded me so much of my in-laws' family cookbook. It's called the Sakala Family Favorites. Sakala was my mother-in-law's maiden name, and I haven't looked at it in a while, but it's got all of the things that you're describing and more, in the sense that it started out as this typewritten in a little binder. Everyone got a copy, and it's got all these different family recipes that were gathered up by my mother-in-law initially. Like, she was the first one to do it. And each recipe, let me put my glasses down. Each recipe includes the name of the person whose recipe it is, right? So it's Grandma Sakala's recipe, or it's Kathy Sakala's recipe, or it's Great Grandma Tremont, and every one who's come along since then has started to contribute their recipes to the cookbook. But then there came a new edition. This is now maybe 15 or more years ago, but that was more like from Staples. You can get the little spiral-bound version, and now it was created on a computer, right? So it wasn't all on a typewriter, but so it had been modified a little. But it included this whole preface by her, with all kinds of. She was very religious, all kinds of religious. I'll have to read it actually, because I'm not sure exactly what all it says. But it includes a genealogy, almost like a family Bible would, and so you kind of know it's a snapshot of who was born by that time, when that version came out. And last thought about it, though, is that it's a little bit of a running joke that you have to be in the family. You have to have been raised in that family to actually be able to successfully use this cookbook, because it's not that they did it on purpose, but and this can be on YouTube forever, and they can all watch it. Everybody knows this is true. That there's a step left out of every recipe.
A lot of people do
Right?
that, actually.
And I don't think it was on purpose, or it'll say something like, cook until done. And so if you weren't raised with Grandma Sakala or with Kathy or, whoever, like, I can't execute the recipes in this cookbook. My daughter can, because she's in the bloodline, and so she's it's very funny,
That's
but
hilarious.
it's so much more than just how to make the things, like how to
Right,
cook the
right.
things.
One of the things that I noticed in doing some of my preliminary research on it is that older cookbooks also had medical advice that was medical advice to be, medicine to be delivered by women. For example, there are poultice recipes. Like onion poultices that would draw out fever or reduce inflammation in a cookbook. How to make,
You see, in my family, the medical advice would be at the end of the recipe, call 911. We weren't cooks. One branch was, most of us know.
It is very interesting, though, the gendered part, because the research, more in sociology, is very clear that in most cultures, for the most part, women are the kinkeepers, and it's not always chosen, like Sue is describing, and that creates its own set of problems and challenges. In some cases, in some families, it's very, I don't know who I'm talking to also, I'm like yelling, but so that you can hear me, but I'm sort of talking to you all. Some people know that it's what they want, or they just sort of naturally take it on, and other people kind of have it thrust upon them.
here are all the family photograph albums, you deal with it.
Do you think
Yeah.
your interest in kinkeeping is generated partially by this cookbook? Because it sounds pretty fascinating.
I don't think so, but it certainly is related. Like, it's time for me to pull that thing out and take a
Because that's
closer look
very
at it.
interesting.
During COVID, we were going to, I guess it sort of ended, we went back to our lives, but when there was nothing to do, we were going to trial all the recipes that don't work if you just follow them literally, and do a new edition that would be, more produced, maybe photos.
Can you tell the story about the young woman in your class who responded about having no recipes?
Oh, well, I taught a class this semester in food media, and there was a lot of discussion during this semester. Of course, various topics, which brought out how families dealt with sharing recipes, how important it was, what importance it played in cultural transmission. and one of my students was, I think, very eloquent in describing how important food was to maintaining a very close bond family. But when we talked about recipes and cookbooks and recipe cards, she, well, no, nothing is written down. It's an oral history.
Nothing.
Nothing. And
Oral
there was this
culture.
question of how willing people were to share accurately the recipes, and whether you could tell the relatives that knew the recipes and try to figure out what they were doing and jot it down somewhere to preserve it. There was some discussion about following the relative that was cooking and recording it and trying to figure it out after the fact. And so that oral culture, but also the sense of secrecy and the fact that part of what came out was the fact that there were some people that didn't want to pass the recipes from generation to generation. But this is my recipe and it jives with me. And I've heard about that in more than one family.
But in some cultures, it is the essence of culture.
Right.
And so the emphasis is on passing down those recipes that
You know, your idea about space finding, it's geography. You know, we have southern cooking. People came from the old country. You know, we're a young country. So, yeah, I can see that, you know, wafting in.
we're talking on the way in today about all the ethnic neighborhoods in
Yeah.
the metropolitan New York area. How some of them have morphed, but people go back to those same neighborhoods to find ethnic foods.
Right.
So food becomes a space finding.
Yeah.
The community leaves, but the food remains.
Right.
And it becomes a magnet
Right.
for people to come
Connection.
and either return to their roots or for people from outside the community to get a feel of visiting diversity.
I want to talk a little bit about authenticity, but before I ask the question, I want to make sure I'm not jumping on somebody else's question.
Those are not some of them are questions, but I have so many points. Bear with me, please don't hate me. This is the cameraman, everyone. So first of all, the one thing that, as you were talking, the one thing that was coming back to my mind was kinkeeping, legacy keeping, and legacy passing.
Same thing.
And because I lost a close relative who was not a blood relative to me, it was my mom's aunt's husband who passed away, but he was my first experience of a grandfather. So I treated him as a grandfather my whole life. And I can't look at his pictures, but everything that reminds me of him, especially in the city, because he introduced me to the city, just kind of flashes back his memories. And I feel also obligated to kind of pass along his legacy to others. And one idea that I have of maybe a medium benches in Central Park.
Oh yeah,
He loves Central Park, so one of my goals is to have a bench plaque dedicated to him, and it will kind of have him there
That's nice.
on his favorite pathway in the Central Park.
That's nice.
The other thing that I also want to emphasize is, because I come from a nation that experienced genocide, we do have the obligation of passing along the storyline or the passing along of legacy of our families or our ancestors who have been through a lot. And I know that's a common experience among other nations as well, but for us it's especially kind of important because we have, as you mentioned, food, we do have pictures, and we do have some kind of stories that we're passing along to generation. And I have a relative who keeps the stories of how her mother or her grandmother experienced the genocide, and because they survived, they were able to tell the stories that, you know, we have been through this, we have been through that. But within that time frame, the pictures, the originals, how we dealt with them, we have a museum in our city and we just passed the pictures to them.
That's interesting.
Those were the photographs that were almost like they were dusty already, so they were turning into the dust as well.
Yeah, that's one of the
We
problems.
digitized some of them, but because in the digitalization, the only thing that we could do was to take a picture with our phones. We couldn't put them in the scanner. We were scared that we would damage them further. So we just took pictures of them, we put marks, and then we just passed a whole bunch of box with pictures to the Museum of Survivors. So that was our way of preserving it. And we just made sure with the museum that they would be either in display or they would be saved.
So you raise many interesting issues, and the word legacy is, I mean, we could do an entire evening. I can't believe we didn't use the word legacy in this conversation.
Well,
It's
that's
really
what we're
important.
talking about.
But the idea that there is an identifiable location, that makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
So
For all kinds of people,
Mhm.
and for all kinds of reasons.
all kinds of, and so when I was talking about the clarity about some of the issues or some of the artifacts that raise issues that are more important generally historically. So the material that I have about a family that was in a village for 500 years, and that village has a Germany, rural Germany, and that village has a small museum. And so now that the fog is lifting a little bit, so, oh well, these are the artifacts that I think belong in that village. And someday I will bring those items to that little village. The items for the archive in Düsseldorf, they are interested in not only the victims of the Nazi regime, but those who survived. And they want to perpetuate the stories of the survivors and what became of them, what did they accomplish. And I can bring that material there. And so the more externally important artifacts and material, to have an identifiable location helps a great deal. But what are the kinkeepers that have the family stuff that nobody else is interested in, including the members of the family? You know, who cares that my aunt took copious notes in biology in 1942? You know, does this get tossed? Because this stuff, I can find the artifact, a home for these artifacts. But does this lose all meaning when it's more internal, familial value?
Well, as you said, it brings you closer to the person. It reminds you of their warmth, kind of, when you're reading their signature. There is an example that it's kind of a personal, but my father passed away when I was 2, but my mom still keeps his handwriting saying "I love you" in her wallet, and every time she changes the wallet, that handwriting goes with her. So that's another way of having something. I don't have many pictures with him, but that just handwriting is just kind of my way of also being reminded of him. But also music. We have recordings of him singing. Those are not digitalized. They're in cassettes. So we have to keep those too as well. Also, the other example that we do at school that might be also interesting for you, we do genealogy trees and lines. That's one of our assignments at school, to kind of create the genealogy and also our way of learning about our ancestors. So we'll be able to pass it on. And that was the last example. Thank you very much for
The very idea of a family tree
yes.
and the symbolism of the tree, I think that could be an entire evening or chapter in the book.
So my question was directly related to that last comment. I have an aunt who died earlier this year, but she was the record keeper for the family reunion. And apparently she has registered with Library of Congress going back, starting 8 generations ago, the descendants of Calvin and Hannah Jones, now through all our family. So that research, though, is going backwards. Would you consider genealogy work part of kinkeeping or the reciprocal of kinkeeping?
Say that again.
Genealogy work, would you consider that part of kinkeeping or more of a reciprocal process?
I mean, I think of it as
Part
part
of
of
it.
it.
I think it's part
Sure,
of it.
of wanting to know where you came from and who all is back there. In a longer version of this kind of paper that I was just presenting to you, I reference, I don't know how many of you watch or like the show Finding Your Roots, Henry Louis Gates, who in each episode he traces, or his whole team of people, I don't know how much he's doing, but traces two celebrities' origins. And why am I talking about this? Just that it's just fascinating, right? Because he always manages to find something really, really interesting, and then things that they, just blows their mind, and it's so meaningful to them as they turn the page, right? If you watch the show, you know what I'm talking about. Like, what, very often it's someone, for example, whose ancestors were enslaved or come from royalty, or you just don't even know what's going to happen, and they don't know either, and it sort of blows their mind, but it then changes their perspective on, or in many cases it's someone who just, there's like an empty hole in their knowledge of their own past, and how it sort of fills things in for them in very meaningful ways. So I think of genealogical work as very much part of it.
I do as well.
Yes, Lance?
Well, I'm just, that makes me think of DNA testing as
Right.
well.
I was waiting for
And
that.
I can't help but think. There was this commercial that was on for a long time for one of these services, and the guy's like, it's like his whole family story was that we were, I don't know if it was Irish or Scottish, but then he does the DNA testing and finds out that his ancestry is German, and he's like, oh, I traded my kilt for a lederhosen, and. What strikes me is that this is tragic. It's done as this like celebration of I found out who I really am, but this is in fact a complete tragedy for this person. I was just wondering what your thoughts were about.
Yeah, I'm sure you all know stories at this point. I think we've all gotten a little closer to this than we want to in some cases, where all of these, what are they called? The various genome mapping companies, Legacy, is that one of them? No. You know what I mean, 23andMe and all of this. Ancestry, thank you.com, which is a sponsor of Finding Your Roots. People are learning all kinds of things about their families that they never knew, about the people who they thought were their parents who aren't, or the siblings out in the world they didn't know they had. All these kinds of things that when people were first, swabbing their mouths and sending them in, I don't think we were thinking this through so carefully, because anyway, it has shattered families in some cases. In some cases people have found out wonderful things, but in other cases it just like completely destroys everything.
It takes some of the power away from the kinkeepers, because the kinkeepers were, they were the ones shaping the narrative of the family. This is who we are, this is where we're from, this is who you are, this, and this is an external voice saying, oh, not so fast, or contradicting what the king.
But can it take the place of that?
What do you mean?
Well, you have a story, you have a narrative,
It's a different story.
and your substitute, it's destroyed, but you don't have another narrative to counter it with. You just have data.
Right, you have to, and so that goes back to the ladder and the abstraction. So you've got something concrete, but you don't have the abstraction to explain who's related to who, how did this happen, what the meaning is.
Yes, and then I see a whole bunch of hands, so I promise I'll I'm Sunday because we've been out there for an hour, talk to me.
I can wait, go ahead.
Okay, I won't forget you, don't. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I am part of the Still family, and I know most of you have heard of the Stills, William Still, James Still, Peter Still. I think 12 years as a slave was kind of, behind Peter Still. William Still, of course, was part of the Underground Railroad that worked with Harriet Tubman. And James Still was Dr. Pines. They were in South Jersey, where people came from all over to get the herbs and what have you. And his knowledge of how they could cure what other people couldn't cure. Okay. It's, we are this year, I believe, celebrating 155 years. A reunion.
Wow.
It's always held in Lawnside, New Jersey, every year. And the only thing that I can warn against is that's great in itself, and you see relatives you haven't seen in years and years and years, and you connect and what have you. then it becomes commercialized. Okay, so you have a booth over here, they're selling this, and you have a booth over here, and where did you come
Oh
from,
my
and how are
God.
you related to us, you know?
Oh my
So
God.
that's the only thing that, I'm finished. I just wanted to, you know, interject and say, just be careful when, you know, when that happens. There's so much you can learn, but you have to be careful.
Yeah. Okay, now let's work from the back forward. So Sandeep.
Okay, so I was going to say this. I found myself in a great position to be the actual kinkeeper of our family, which I'm so grateful for. My father was a surgeon. He came to this country. You got, many of you are too young for this, but you know those ectochrome slides?
Oh, yeah.
With the projectors? My dad took 4,000 of those in an 8-year period. We have the 8mm footage, all this stuff, me being a filmmaker, working with Peggy, I've taken all of this. But I've also found a lot of letters and things about, for those of you who have this, when that narrative shifts and you find things out. My mom wrote a letter to, I don't know how this actually happened, but I have the original letter. She wrote a letter to the Soviet Union asking to be an astronaut. Blew my mind because my mother was a dietitian, my father was a surgeon, that she had these dreams. Right? And only when both my parents passed away, when I went through all of this stuff, because Mrs. Stewart was married, had kids, all of that stuff. Now, there are narratives in there that I don't know. I found the joy of sex in my, and I was just like, okay, this is,
Oh my God.
Indian parents don't do this, right? Do not do this.
How'd
at
you
all.
get here?
So, you know, there's these things like, I don't know what my responsibility is in terms of like my nephews. I don't have kids of my own, but what do I share with them? Right? I want to share everything with them, but I don't know, so you've talked about this a lot and I've deeply resonated with this. I just don't know what to share. I really don't. Like, do I share it all? Do I share none of it? Like, by the way, you need to keep that. Please keep that and archive that. That should not go anywhere. Like, that needs to be said. I just don't know what to do. It's my comment. Anyone have thoughts on that?
I wish I had an answer because
Please.
I'm struggling with the same type of question.
Yeah.
I've gotten to the point of this is of public interest, this is family interest. I haven't gotten to the point where I say this is what the entire family can share. I can tell you that my mother, as Kinkeeper, kept a book and a family tree. She tried to put it on the computer, but the program blew up when first cousins married, and the program wouldn't let her input that. So she went back to handwriting the family tree. And so I have this handwritten family tree with stories. And she had two versions. She had the version for public consumption and then the real version.
Oh,
So
my.
who do I share the real version with? This is a lot more interesting than
the
the version for
sanitized
public,
one?
the public consumption one is not nearly as interesting.
My general rule of thumb is something we have talked about too. I have documents from my family and my possession that would be hurtful
That's,
if they
wow.
were made public to other members of the family. And my own, it may be entirely wrong, but my conscience tells me don't be hurtful. And then, of course, who am I to decide, right? Whether, but do no harm. It is.
I mean, that's in a way that's the direction that I've been going with these two versions of our family, which is if I see material in there that clearly hasn't been shared with someone, there must be a reason that it wasn't shared. And so I've kind of held back some of that.
Well, you know, there's personal history and then the whole world's history. And so some of the things that you're talking about in my mind belong to world history
For the
as
ages.
well as personal history. And another thought came to me that paper disintegrates unless it's acid-free paper. So maybe digitizing things is a better way to preserve. I have no clue about legalities. And then I had this very strange thought when I watched Gates the other night. do we want to know? If they find out we can go back, 400 years or 4,000 years or whatever, eventually. So if you're, I'm Italian. If I'm related to Leonardo da Vinci, great. If I'm also German, what if I'm related to Hitler? So there's a lot more involved. And I think that, and also, there are historical demographers who are experts in telling you where these belong. And, there's a time when we should not be spinning our wheels. We call up the expert and get some help, because I think it can make you crazy. And I'm wondering about us as Americans. We don't have history. We don't have relatives going back. You have a different history.
Well, we have a different history. I mean, but I truly believe when National Geographic was there, I took a picture and it was posted in National Geographic. That kind of opened up another ball. I mean, it was a totally different ball game. I mean, last year when I went to the family reunion, there were a couple of actors there. I mean, from Hollywood. Come on, people. I mean, it's so we're going in a different direction now. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and there was so much. I mean, it was so much good can come out of a family reunion. I mean, you're connecting with people you haven't seen maybe in 20 years, 30 years, or more. People you didn't even know you were related to. And I mean, there are all kinds of books. Now, the Underground Railroad is a book. James Still, The Doctor of the Pines, that's a book. Peter, I forget the title of the book. He sold as a slave or something like that, and then came back. Peter Still, and it's and I have all the books. I'm ashamed of myself that I can't think of the title of that book, but it's there.
The title of my book.
But it's like I said, you just have to be careful. You have to be careful. Have to keep
In the back.
informing.
There's a question way in the back. Yes, you there.
I've really been listening to this, and it's really fascinating also by the role of the kinkeeper as keeping the positive alive, but also the role of the kinkeeper to the responsibility to deal with trauma that they will find in the family tree. Because, and I was reminded of that ancestry commercial where it's like, oh yeah, my grandmother, she was a heroine, she was in World War II, and she fought the Nazis. You know what? Not all of your ancestors fought the Nazis. Some of your ancestors might have been douchebags. Some might have been more than douchebags. They might have really, conflicted serious harm on other people. And how do we as kinkeepers navigate that, right? How do we as kinkeepers also, and that responsibility, right? Do we do harm? Do we bury? Do we just sweep it under the carpet? How do we deal with that, right? How do we keep the positive connections going? How do we, share the recipes among the family that kind of create that kinship, but then also what responsibility do we have when we really find bad stuff? And there is bad stuff in, here in the U.S. I have a European background. My parents were kids during the World War. There were some not very savory uncles and aunts in my ancestry, and you have to live up and you have to live with that too. And I know that I will also have to share that with my daughter. I will not say they were all lovely people. So it is the kinkeeper has a very important role as really balancing that. And it's a hard role. It can be a very joyful role, but it can be a hard role.
Yeah, and well, and Missy in a second, but I also wanted to throw in the point, and you also, or you don't have to think about it, I guess we could just not think about it and just plan to live forever, but if you're the kinkeeper and the holder of all that stuff, then what do you plan to do with it, or who are you gonna leave it to, or are you gonna like burn it all, like what, someone's gonna get it next, and so even if you don't disclose it, what's gonna happen to it next? But I know I saw some other hands, Missy and,
So I just first want to compliment you on such a fun and rich panel where there will be at least 17 papers will come out of it because there's so much there. I'm touched by both of you identifying yourselves as the kinkeepers in a situation where people don't always think people who didn't reproduce are in that role, but it made me think so much about the idea of the auntie. And it's such a wonderful title because it's inclusive. But I'm also thinking about the media piece, right? So we're talking about the DNA, which is a whole set of crazy stuff that talks about priorities in our culture that I find fascinating, why you care about that. But Facebook, I'm just going to use the Facebook. I have already twice in my family we discovered a person that had been put up for adoption and is now woven into the family because that's how we responded, but the other parent responded in don't ever call me again, you know. So that just happened by Facebook finding my grandmother, right? So you can't really it's not a separate kinkeeping anymore, right? That's the thing. I have recently been found by some cousins because there was a lot of divorce in my family. Now I'm happy to go meet them. It'll be fun for me because that doesn't scare me, but you understand it's not in my control.
right.
Once you have social media, you don't have to get the DNA test, right? And there's not a lot of secrets kept because not everybody's keeping the secrets. So while I think the tradition of the carrying of the knowledge and the recipes that I have from my husband's family, right, are really important and dear to me. I also just feel like the whole notion of kinkeeping has exploded as we've exploded out with the media that we're using.
We have two over
Oh,
here.
yes, Missy,
Yeah, also thinking about living in the digital age. I have 35,000 photos on my phone right now. I'm thinking about digital hoarding because I'm a digital hoarder, I guess, and I think we probably all are because, like, there's just no infrastructure right now for what do you do with 35,000 photos. And I don't know, like, I guess I just will continuously like digitally hoard and take pictures because there's just no end in sight. There is no filling up the film roll and then going and buying more film and putting those photos in an album. So I just don't really know like what that landscape looks like now. Is this gonna be valuable at all? Or is this something that like my children are gonna want to see, like me doing something random 3 years ago today? Is there any value in that at all? But I have this like time capsule, is kind of how I'm viewing it now, on my phone that I'm just carrying from one iPhone to the next iPhone. And will that even be accessible in 20 years if iPhones are obsolete, if we have no more cloud storage? I mean, who the hell knows with data centers anymore, what that's even doing. And I'm also just nervous about like if one day that's just no longer accessible and I lose access to all of my photos since I had an iPhone since I was 12. So since I was 12 years old, I have so many photos of now my life.
Well, the answer is you print everything, and then I'll take another story.
And I'm like, should I be putting these photos in, like, is physical media the answer? Is it not? Paper disintegrates, things get lost. What do you consider important now that I have, let's say, 50,000 photos?
Yeah, and I have written and spoken a little bit about this part too, about the fact that, well, not the fact, but my concern that the future isn't going to know about us at all, right? Because all of our stuff is in these digital formats that even I can't keep up with my own, things that have changed over the last 20
light bulbs
years.
for the projector.
Right, exactly. Or
Right.
it's platforms, it's accounts that legally do not get passed down to. So I'm thinking specifically of a friend who recently died, who was a dance teacher of mine, and some of you know I'm very involved in dance. And for years and years, he would record. He would do video recordings of our classes and our workshops and things, and so there's all this video footage that I don't think his family even really knows he had, or if they do know, I don't know that, not that they wouldn't care, but it wouldn't mean as much to them as it does to me and a couple of my friends, but also I don't think anybody would know how to access any of that stuff. I don't know where he saved it, or I think he finally did sort of organize it all into one place, but what's that place and does it still exist now that he has died?
Password?
Who pays for it?
Who pays for it?
Right.
Yeah.
Lewis and then.
Oh wait, Lewis hasn't spoken.
This in some ways maybe gets to authenticity, which is the word you uttered before you opened it up to all of us. I feel like a lot of this is about people trying to define their own identities and how much of the past and past people do I want to glom on to because I feel like it enhances my sense of identity. But I also think about some people in my grandparents' generation who wanted to wipe the past away with we're the new immigrants here. We want no connection over there. We don't want to talk about it. Well, there'll be a few stories and that'll be it. There, and to your point, Amanda, I feel like this is pretty much akin to FOMO, but it's afraid of losing the memories, but I don't know why, because I'm not necessarily going to them. I've always saved greeting cards. So I have all these greeting cards. Should I save a greeting card from an aunt who sent me when I was 4, and for some reason it got saved, which is maybe why I save it, and it doesn't have anything written except a signature. But it's that aunt's signature, and that's authentic. But is that part? That's not part of my identity. So is it a fetish? I don't know where I'm going with this. And if I knew, I wouldn't have as much stuff.
But by the way, when you mentioned the signature, I mean, you mentioned these handwritten. Another element to this is handwriting, and when I read this or I see Marshall McLuhan's signature, it's on a letter. To me, that means something.
The trace.
Yeah. And that ink, that signature, the distinctive handwriting, the distinctive signature, that's a thing of the past. And how much more important does that become as that becomes lost in time?
Right.
The ability to write, to develop a distinctive handwriting, that's something that's being lost across generations, and that may become, and the signature on that greeting card may become more and more important because our writing has changed.
I know a number of people, and maybe you do too, who have gotten tattoos of the signature of someone, like a parent or a grandparent who has died. It's not that unusual. Lance's looking at me like, but it's a thing. No? Nobody?
No.
Okay, you're nodding. How are we on time? Are we like
22.
22? A couple more?
I just wanted to make a point about social media and iCloud, for example. If you're able to add a legacy contact
Yes.
on your phone and everywhere. For example, I have mine, who in case of anything will be able to access all of your information, be it your social media accounts or your iCloud storage. I don't know how it works with Google phones or Androids, but in case of anything, there is someone who will be able to access all of your information. I don't know also about bank accounts, but your phone will be able to be unlocked by that person. Apple has the service, but they need about 15 days to unlock their devices in case there is no legacy contact. But if you go there with like a certificate that you are related to that person, they will be able to unlock everything. Banks will be able to give you access to that person's everything. So wherever you go, there will be a way in case you are like legally connected to that person, and unless you're not assigned through the phone or from somewhere that you are their legacy contact, they will be able to give you access to everything.
Well, that's platform dependent, and
Yeah.
I did some research and they all have policies, but even then there needs to be a separation because there's my personal stuff, there's maybe sensitive business documents that shouldn't be accessed by family members, maybe there's an OnlyFans account, right? So you have to kind of think of that separation as well.
Yeah, Michael.
First of all, thank you so much for this incredibly rich discussion.
He brought his whole family to this. Oh no, there's one decision.
I'm trying to see if there's a connection here or not. So I just want to bring it up about this difference between scarcity and abundance of artifacts. The difference between someone carrying that single tintype of their beloved in their hip pocket versus 35,000 photos, or having the scrap of a proverb or a signature in your wallet, versus a digital archive of every waking moment of a person's life. And I want to see if there's a connection between that and the control of the Kinkeeper as a storyteller of the family and the family history. That the Kinkeeper is taking these artifacts, these scarce artifacts, and then building out the narrative or the story and deciding, as you mentioned, what to include and what to exclude. You know, what is the positive story of the family, what might be hurtful to some people, and the realms of access. Almost like there's a secret vault room where, you know, if you're prepared, you can enter to find out the real story. Versus the abundance of artifacts that serve as data points, not unlike 23andMe, that help you reconstruct that narrative, that story, through just the simple, overwhelming flood beyond which any human can comprehend. So therefore we have to use some sort of machine learning or some sort of big data processing to try to comprehend what all of this means. We can't possibly look at every digital photograph or, you know, just as an analog, you know, every YouTube video ever posted. It's impossible for us to watch that. We would die before there's more being uploaded as we attempt that feed. So what happens to the Kinkeeper, that sense of an abundance of artifacts?
And it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer, but it's fascinating. But it really raises this issue of power. And I think there's been a lot written about the unrecognized or unpaid labor involved with kinkeeping. Maybe less of a recognition of the power of the kinkeeper, the unrecognized power.
Can I toss in the word curate? Because that seems
Yeah.
to be what,
Yeah.
who's curating, why are we curating? You know, I think that seems to be the essence of this. Like, was it Amanda? I'm sorry. So Amanda's got $35,000 or 35,000 images. Like, I just don't know how to process that. But like, who's going to curate? Why are you going to curate? I think that's a really important kind of discussion about, like, generationally, like not only in this country, the world over, but different cultures. Like, how do we share information? That I think, Susan, you alluded to, that you're from a certain culture. How can we share those lessons with other cultures, other people, other genders, other religions, where the humanity comes back? And for me, it's like we're splitting that, and I'm seeing it, and I think all of us are seeing it just get fragmented. How do we bring that in? I think technology, to a certain degree, could be, to a certain degree, with AI, right? How do we curate? Is the thing that comes to me. Sorry, I didn't mean to inject.
That's also difficult because something that if I were to do an audit today, it's like this is relevant, this isn't. Then something happens 2 years from now that all of a sudden made that thing that I talked about super relevant.
Really relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The storytelling function, the narrative function that inheres in almost all kin-keeping endeavors, however thinly you slice them, I think is something that at least I haven't grappled with. You know, the very power of the story itself, and who gets to decide what is powerful and to whom, and under what circumstances. I'm not sure.
Lance?
And I think we could separate out these different items that, you know, we're talking about sort of time binding and information storage, and that's, you know, like a whole big problematic area right now. Kinkeeping, though, as you're describing it, and you know, Mary's just saying the storytelling is a different aspect of it. And I was thinking of the networking too, and it's just, what are your connections to other people? And one of the things is that in previous eras, this was so essential for survival that you had to, you know, you couldn't survive on your own, or it's very difficult. And so knowing who's your family and who you can turn to, and who you can ask for money, for example,
Who's part of your tribe,
or for a job. Yeah, but
Right.
but it's not just this abstract notion of of my tribe, but also, you know, who can I really call upon? You know, when they say it takes a village, I mean it takes a family in that sense. And you know, part of it is the post-war nuclear family, which is really the breakdown of the extended family. But it's just also that we don't depend on cousins and uncles and so forth to get us a job, to go into the family business, you know, for all of these survival things, to make a match for us. We're so atomized, in this sense that function really loses a lot of its value and power, in that sense. And so I think, the network, that context of how it's working is really like a key part of this.
Right. You're bringing up something interesting that clicks. Attachment feelings. Why are we concerned about this? Because we want this sense of attachment, and something I remember.
But it's not emotional. It's
Well,
really like very functional.
But
And that's the
that's
functional
one
part
side of it. But I think we're attached to the past and history. I'm wondering about this. We're a print culture. I pulled this book off my shelf today. I was thinking about it, this issue. That is there something about the fact that 500 years of print make us want to grab the history, and also the fact that people lived in tribes and little neighborhoods and whatever you're describing, when that was normal or usual. We didn't have single family households. We didn't have, so I'm wondering if there's some sort of attachment. That's the reason I bring up this word. I was shocked when I was an undergraduate and I learned that people grieve for their enemies, like they fought over the fence for 50 years and then their neighbor dies, and so that we're attached to other people just humanly. So you're bringing up like the two ends of that, and why do we want to pass this on? Why is it important? It has something to do with our feelings of attachment.
Oh, yes.
Answering your question, Khalil Gibran in his book answered your question.
He did?
And he talked about a priest that was a good priest, and he had to preach between two churches. So as this good man was presenting his good sermon at the first church, he rushed out of the church to the second church. On this path to the second church, he was the only one that ever took this particular path. But at one point in the path, there was a fork in the road. And the man, the good priest, saw the bleeding, hideous man. And he understood, the good priest that was good all of his life, he never did anything wrong. He understood that if he didn't save this bleeding man, he would die. in a minute or two.
Exactly.
So he went over and he asked the man, "Who are you?" And the man said that he was the devil.
Ah,
And the priest saved him. Does that answer your question a little bit?
no, because I'm thinking biologically. You're thinking morally and ethically.
I'm glad that I finally do.
That's what I'm saying.
Last word. Oh wait, go her and then Terry. Last word.
The one thing that I'll say is I don't know how many of you watched it, but Coco, the Disney cartoon, I think it sums up today's conversation because it shows why we're preserving the pictures, because we're keeping the memories of the people alive. And if their picture does not exist, they will not be able to come and join us for one day in a year, per the Mexican culture and the heritage. And it also shows the passing of cooking, because they're cooking their parents' food and they're showing it to their grandchildren and they're raising their own children, and all the cultural aspects that are moving forward. This in particular is specific to the Mexican culture, but it's also very relevant to other people who have established the connection with their relatives and are trying to keep their memories alive. So yeah, that was my pop culture contribution to this.
And Terry.
Last word. You, Terry.
I wonder about the self-perception of the kinkeeper. We haven't really addressed that. For example, there are those who found their niche in the back seat. That's where they found their power. If they were, you know, in a family situation where someone dominated and led the group. So they said, oh, all right, fine, you know, I'll be in the back seat. It's my power. I speak personally to this because my mother found her place as being in the back seat. And oh boy, did she ever love that. She found that she had so much more ability to express herself, not being up there in the front. So that self-perception is so important, but often it doesn't get addressed because it's sometimes somewhat amorphous and and often hard to grasp. I think that's a really important point, that I think a lot of it has to do with that sense of self, that sense of identity, and sometimes it allows you a luxury of kind of being the fly on the wall. I have to collect this for the family. Let me be the one, not in the picture, but taking the picture. So I will be the family photographer, and then you become the repository for the family visual archive, or I will be the one that you know, I'm the one that keeps the records, the greeting cards, the invitations to weddings, and that gives them a sense of identity without having to be out front and to be the extrovert. And so I wonder if there is a connection between being a family introvert or being overwhelmed by others around you and taking on that role of kinkeeper.
Oh,
It gives you a
depend on
sense
the
of power,
person.
we were talking about before, but it also may be a comfortable position for some introverts.
I think that, you know, since my father was the Kinkeeper, and I called him, my father was a Jewish mother, that was his role. But his identity was not that. So I think it has to be individual.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's very individual, but I think that
But
for
there
some
is-
people, it
but-
might give them that path to be part of the family without being uncomfortable. It gives them an important role.
Yeah.
Well, this
Thank
feels
you.
like the point where I should say thank you, Chair, for let me say, truly stay tuned, because we really are trying trying to put together some sort of a plan for an edited book, and we're going to be looking for people who want to contribute. And so if you're feeling inspired and you want to write something, stay tuned. Thank you.
We have a publisher that's potentially interested. We're going to be issuing a call for scholarly papers within at least a month or 2 months, so stay tuned.
Let us know.
Thank you.